It wasn't a scrum. He was murdered. We have to start using the words.
No, we all watched it.
We watched him try to protect another woman.
In this clip from Abby Phillip's show on CNN, the panel breaks down how MAGA figures are struggling to stick to their alternate reality narrative about ICE in Minnesota, especially now that video evidence blowing that version up is circulating widely. On the panel are Kerry Champion, Batya Ungar-Sargon, Arthur Idala, Representative Adrianiano Espat, and Paul Mercurio. I'll be adding my thoughts as we go, and it definitely gets heated. Drop your take in the comments, and before we dive in, don't forget to smash that like button and hit subscribe. Let's roll.
In the Trump era, we are used to the brash and unapologetic style of the president and his allies. Never back down, never apologize. But this time, the gaslighting is not working. After the deadly ICE shooting of another American citizen in the streets, there's an obvious U-turn being made tonight by this White House. The controversial Border Patrol chief that has been on the ground has now been sidelined. And tonight, DHS has suspended his social media accounts. And in his place, Border czar, ICE czar, Tom Homan, who reportedly disagreed with some of the more controversial tactics, will be sent to Minneapolis. Also, the president's tone has softened toward Minnesota Democrats. He's saying now that he had productive calls with both the governor and with the mayor today. The reason for this is pretty obvious. The videos of the shooting of Alex Pretti completely contradict the administration's initial accounts of what happened. Stephen Miller was quick to call Pretti, quote, a would-be assassin and a domestic terrorist who tried to murder law enforcement. And here's how Kristi Noem and Gregory Bovino characterized the incident just minutes after the shooting.
An individual approached U.S. Border Patrol officers with a 9mm semi-automatic handgun. The officers attempted to disarm this individual, but the armed suspect reacted violently. Fearing for his life and for the lives of his fellow officers around him, an agent fired defensive shots.
The agents attempted to disarm the individual, but he violently resisted. This looks like a situation where an individual wanted to do maximum damage and massacre law enforcement.
This individual went and impeded their law enforcement operations, attacked those officers, had a weapon on him and dozens of rounds of ammunition, wishing to inflict harm on these officers, coming brandishing like that and impeding their work that they were doing.
Now, just to recap, according to them, a quote, would-be assassin approached and attacked those agents, brandished a 9mm gun, looking to inflict, quote, maximum damage and massacre law enforcement. Now, I want you to tell me if that's what you see when you watch this.
The people! The is wrong with you? Honestly! What did you just do? What the did you just do? What the
So, as public opinion turns dramatically, what if this tragedy had not been caught on video? Where would we be right at this moment, Congressman? And do you think that this is a moment, maybe rare in the Trump era, where you see a majority of Americans standing up and saying, no, you can't lie to us?
Well, I think that this is MAGA insanity. They want us to believe something different than what we see with our very own eyes. But this is some of the behavior that has been happening in the barrios across the country, where including American citizens are being detained. 170 American citizens have been detained. I visited 4 kids in Monterrey, Mexico, including a 10-year-old little girl with a brain tumor, that are out there, and they're U.S. citizens. So this is finally hit home, and people are seeing it for what it is, and I think there's a backup, but it's a bit too late.
How How much? I think
can I
long
just
term
say
damage
I'm
do you
not
think that there is for
surprised.
the Trump administration because of how they handled this.
Well, the fish stinks from the head down. I'm not forgiving Bavino and Nome, but I'm not shocked by this when you have a president look us in the eye and say, oh, January 6th, they were just taking a tour of the Capitol. Yeah, and they went out and had lunch. They've been taught that they can say anything and get away with it. Oh, wait a minute, be elected president. So what ends up happening? They come out, they get a script, they know their boss is going to like the script, and we're off and running. And now this one blew up in their face because a man gets shot 10 times and people are now protesting in the streets. And I don't know about you, but if you look at history, this feels like the Vietnam War protests. And that's when Nixon finally started to get the message, and Johnson, that things were going south. And that's
I think what Paul Mercurio brought up about this feeling like the Vietnam-era protests is worth pausing on. There are some echoes of history here. Leaders only start acting like change is needed when the political cost finally hits them, not because they were ever personally moved by loss of life. That's a pattern you can see with Nixon, and you can see it again now with Trump. And let's be real, the video evidence that's come out makes it really hard for anyone to stick to the usual spin. Some folks are still trying to label people like protesters or bystanders as terrorists, but comparing that to calling Renee Good a terrorist is just as absurd. Good, a U.S. citizen, was shot and killed by an ICE agent in Minneapolis in early January, and that incident alone ignited major protests and outrage. Then later, on January 24th, another Minneapolis resident, Alex Pretti, was killed by federal agents during a confrontation, and that too was caught on video and has drawn national criticism. Footage shows him trying to help others, being pepper sprayed and tackled by agents, then shot multiple times. The Department of Justice has since opened a federal civil rights probe into that killing. So when someone on that panel says things like, he was shot while being arrested, or tries to minimize what happened, come on. The video doesn't really support that. It shows escalation, an agent shoving someone, the person pushing back to protect someone else, and then agents pinning and ultimately firing many shots. That looks like an execution to a lot of people watching closely online. And sure, now we're hearing that Tom Homan is being sent in to make changes, and some political actors are signaling shifts in priorities. But if you look at what's actually happening on the ground and what local communities are reporting, it doesn't feel like anything fundamentally different has taken effect yet. Now, Batya Ungar-Sargon is about to jump in here, and she's very much a MAGA apologist. She opens with a few lines that honestly might make you pause, because at first glance, what she's saying sounds reasonable. You might even catch yourself nodding along for a second. But for my Sir Mix-a-Lot fans, hang tight, because there are a couple of very big buts coming right behind it.
what's happening here.
So a couple of really pointed editorials. The New York Post says, however noble the mission it is to get rid of the worst of the worst, the broad support for it is now ebbing fast. Mr. President, the American people didn't vote for these scenes, and you can't continue to order them to not believe their lying eyes. The Wall Street Journal editorial board seems to suggest that either many ICE agents aren't properly trained, or they are so on edge as they face opposition in the streets that they are on a hair trigger. Either way, this calls for rethinking how ICE conducts itself, especially in Minnesota as tensions build. It isn't just about Alex Pretti. I think what these editorials point to is questions now being raised, including on Capitol Hill, about ICE's tactics. That's what these protesters have been protesting about to begin with.
Two things about what Batya Ungar-Sargon says here really grind my gears. First off, there's this maddening claim that the person wasn't murdered, but it was just a scrum, like it was some kind of chaotic arrest gone sideways, like, oops, bad shooting with a tear emoji or something. But anyone who's actually watched the video knows it doesn't line up with that narrative at all. The footage is disturbing and much clearer than MAGA defenders admit. And then she throws out this line, acting like Donald Trump has suddenly come out and said, hey, this went too far, like he's leading some kumbaya moment. That's just not true. Trump has not made a statement that even remotely sounds like he's calling for de-escalation or taking responsibility. His responses so far have been defensive and, in many cases, doubling down on his framing of these incidents. In fact, in past comments about the first Minneapolis shooting of Renee Good, he called her very disorderly and claimed she ran over an ICE officer, a claim that video evidence and local officials have disputed. Now he has sent Tom Homan down to Minnesota, and there are internal shifts within ICE guidance aimed at reducing direct agitation with protesters, a sort of tactical adjustment. But that's a far cry from the kind of accountability or contrition Batya suggests. And here's the bigger picture. Whenever MAGA gets backed into a corner and tries to play the "we're all one nation" card, I can't take it seriously. You can't just push a hard-right, divisive agenda, stoke polarization for years, and then expect everyone to toss all that aside when it starts hurting you politically. That's not healing. That's damage control.
I found Secretary Noem's comments on Alex Pretti to be unforgivable. Everything I've heard about this person suggests that he was a wonderful human being. And to desecrate the dead like that, utterly, utterly unjustifiable. And I don't see how a person should be allowed to remain in public service after lying so blatantly to the American people. Now, that said, it's very clear that the president is on a very different page. He refused to say that he supports the ICE agent in the shooting until we have more information. He wants to know what's on the footage, which I do as well, and I hope that that gets exposed. That said, Alex Pretti was obviously not murdered. He was in a scrum that ended in a bad shoot. And I think this is a moment that we should all try to find our way back to each other as Americans and come off the edge. And I'm really hoping we can find that common ground here, because I think that this is really a moment where the president himself is saying, we've gone too far in our separate corners and we have to find a way to work together. And I was so pleased to hear that he had these great conversations with Fry and with Walz.
I think Arthur Idala actually makes two really solid points there. But when you zoom out, the bigger issue is this. While they're now saying, we want to look into this, and we want an investigation, this is the same administration that's been blocking investigations all along. These are the people who've been arguing that the agents involved have absolute immunity. They've encouraged this behavior from the start. What's really happening is that the political music stopped. Things started getting hot for Trump, and suddenly they needed a fall guy. And it looks like that guy is Greg Bavino. He's out. But let's not pretend this represents some moral awakening. Tom Homan may be more cautious in tone, but he's hardly a peacenik handing out flower garlands. So we'll see how this plays out. I hope troops are pulled back and things de-escalate, but so far, I haven't seen any real signs of that. What is remarkable about this moment is that they've finally backed off the original narrative, the one where Kristi Noem was calling the victims domestic terrorists. That whole framing of, do what we say, or you're an enemy combatant, where it's basically free fire. When you stop and think about it, it sounds like something out of a dystopian TV show, except this isn't fiction. This is actually happening in the United States. Now you're starting to hear elected officials and even some mainstream media voices saying, this feels authoritarian, this feels fascist. And yeah, it does. But this didn't come out of nowhere. This has been building for close to a decade. This is what Trump's first term would have looked like without the so-called adults in the room. These have always been his instincts. And when things get uncomfortable, his pattern never changes. He acts like a spectator to his own policies, as if he didn't set all of this in motion. Carrie Champion nailed it when she said, he's driving. If he wanted this stopped, it would stop. Period. We also know how this ends if it gets worse. He'll blame Greg Bavino, throw people under the bus, and move on. This administration is a throw everyone under the bus machine. What's wild to me, and I've said this before, is that people inside this administration still seem to think they're immune. Like Caroline Leavitt believes she'll never be next. The only person who ever seems untouchable is Stephen Miller, whispering poison into the king's ear. But make no mistake, no one is truly safe. Trump's loyalty game has only one winner, and it's always him. He will never take responsibility. He will never accept blame. He is fully capable of convincing himself that none of this is his fault, even when it plainly is. Some of us have seen this for years. And yet there's still a large part of this country, smart, capable people, who are completely enthralled by this cult of personality figure, this clownish strongman who in their minds can do no wrong. I've never understood it, and I don't think I ever will. And now we're feeling the consequences. This is exactly what so-called alarmists warned about. American blood being shed in the streets by Americans. I hope this turns around. I really do. But I'm worried it gets worse before it gets better, because as this administration sinks, it's going to lash out harder. And there will be collateral damage. I hope I'm wrong. Tell me what you think I'm missing in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.